Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. This is your host, Ian Hartitz, and a quick disclaimer, everybody. Unfortunately, this podcast was recorded before the Carson Wentz trade. Obviously, we knew that this was a possibility as we started this 32 for 32 series, and something like this could happen. So check out PFF.com for full thoughts on fantasy implications, real-life implications, all things football implications on the Carson Wentz trade. Just realized that myself and my guest did not know that this trade happened when we recorded it earlier this February. So difficult finding 32 schedules, to record these podcasts, and it's unfortunate that I wasn't able to do it, and it's slightly better to avoid something like this, so my apologies, but just realized we did not know about the trade. We knew something like this could happen again, so this is not a useless podcast by any stretch of the imagination. Please just don't think we are too big of idiots as we discuss what could be happening at the quarterback position, as it has already been solved. So thank you as always for listening, and enjoy. Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we continue our 32 for 32 series with a look at the Indianapolis Colts. Might have blown your Survivor League in the first week of the 2020 season, but truly was a solid 11-5 year. One of the more complete teams in the league. Ultimately couldn't get past the Buffalo Bills in the wild card round. Who could, other than the Chiefs, to be fair? Want to break down what figures to be an exciting team, because again, one of the more complete teams in the league. Just need to figure out the all ever important, I should say, quarterback position. I have a very special guest on to help me accomplish this task. He's been covering the Colts since 2012. You can hear him on 107.5 The Fan and follow him on Twitter at KBowen1070. Kevin Bowen. Kevin, happy offseason and thanks for the time, man.
Yeah, what's up, Ian? Thanks for having me on, man.
For sure. And yeah, man, so Colts, one of the more interesting teams I think we have out here, because, really it is 2 or 3 needs away. A lot of teams would like to say, they're a quarterback away from being in it. It is the most important position, but truly in the Colts case, they're quarterback away from literally putting the cherry on the top of an otherwise well-constructed roster for the most part. But we'll get to that here in a second. Kevin's going to tee us off first with his top 3 team needs for the Colts ahead of 2021 offseason. We'll go through our typical gut feel round, then get a bold prediction from Kevin before he heads out. So Kevin, let's hear your top 3 team needs for the Colts ahead this offseason.
Well, yeah, can I go quarterback 1, 2, and 3?
Fair enough.
I think short-term, long-term, quarterback is certainly the biggest need. And it's a very foreign place for this franchise. They're very fortunate to have Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck fall into their laps with the number 1 overall pick. And then even Phillip Rivers, in a way, it worked out really well that the Chargers were done with him without, that franchise quarterback in place, and that Frank Reich had that connection. So, here you are. Is it going to be a short-term stopgap that has familiarity in the system? Is it Nick Foles? Is it Jacoby Brissett for a third time, which I know a ton of fans would absolutely hate? Do they go long-term? Do we see a big trade up in the draft, a la, the 2 AFC finalists this year in Buffalo and Kansas City as well? So I thought Matthew Stafford made a lot of sense. But again, that value and what the Rams could offer is just totally different. So I'd say quarterback definitely number 1. I'd say left tackle 2. Anthony Costanzo, they drafted in 2011. He also retired, although Phillip Rivers' retirement trumps him. But Costanzo's been the left tackle for this franchise for the past decade. He's been extremely durable. I think very underappreciated from a national sense. And obviously those 2 positions, go hand in hand. When you look at the Manning Luck years, it's interesting. If I'm not mistaken, I think the draft prior to taking those 2 quarterbacks, they took a left tackle. Anthony Costanzo in 2011. I think Tarek Glenn was taken right before they selected Peyton Manning in 98. So, what do you do there? Offensive line means so much to Chris Bauer. There's certainly been talk of moving Quentin Nelson from left guard to left tackle. That would help you out financially, and I think from a resource standpoint. But, this is a guy that's only played 10 snaps there since high school. He didn't even do it at Notre Dame either. And then lastly, I would say I'm kind of torn on the last need. Wide receiver, edge rusher, and cornerback all kind of fit in there. I'd say edge rusher, just long-term. Justin Houston has been very durable here over the last 2 years. But if you look deeper, just don't look at the sack numbers. Look a little bit deeper. He hasn't been as consistent of a rusher as you would like. And some of their young draft picks there haven't emerged either. So I think edge rusher would probably round out my my third need.
Great stuff. Yeah, I had QB, pass catcher, and edge, and you brought up a great point about left tackle with needing to replace Costanzo, obviously. Now, we'll stick with edge for a second because, I mean, DeForest Buckner came in, I think, almost exceeded expectations with how good he was when he was healthy. Obviously, you got Darius Leonard behind him. I mean, those are two blue-chip studs in the front seven. Obviously, you got to replace Houston and Autry and Muhammad to some extent if these guys do end up taking their talents elsewhere. But you got to feel good, I mean, somewhat good, again, about maybe having a slightly, below average edge unit with the guys they got in the middle still.
It's kind of funny, Ian. I almost look at that and think, why wasn't the edge rush better?
True.
If you look at the Colts, they finished this season second in the league in run defense. I mean, that's not a unit. You're in Derrick Henry's division, and you face some decent runners. They faced Baltimore this year, and again, to be the second in the league in run defense, and then like you said, Buckner, an all-pro year. I mean, he's commanding double teams, seemingly every third down, and yet your edge group consistently just couldn't win a whole lot of one-on-one. So in this defense, Matt Eberflus's scheme, there's kind of three hot spots that they really focus on. It's the three technique where Buckner is, it's the will linebacker with Leonard, and then it's Kenny Moore in that slot. And again, three really good football players. But if you look at edge rusher and you look at outside corner, those are a bit more up in the air. Outside corner, Xavier Rhodes had a very fine year, coming here and kind of resurrecting things. But you got to believe he's going to find that money, considering the big decrease he had to take there and being cut by the Vikings. So I still look at edge rusher, which, as we know, is very difficult to find. But I think considering the amount of attention Buckner gets, how well you did against the run, it was just disappointing to see that edge group not have a little bit more pop.
Yeah, it's a great point. And obviously, whenever we look at pass defense, it's pass rush versus coverage. So obviously, you can always add some resources to both. Moving over to the offense real quick, quarterback position is the big elephant in the room. I got to ask, because I've loved watching this guy play. He gets a bad rap around the league because one time he walked into someone else's party when he had a few too many. Chad Kelly, I saw nothing but good things from Frank Reich about Chad Kelly last year. I know he's been a knucklehead over the years, but is there any chance this guy could get back in there, or is it just a situation that's not going to help itself out?
Yeah, unfortunately for all my SEC followers and, former Bills followers and whatnot, Chad Kelly had a big following, and I certainly appreciated that when he would get into preseason games. But I don't see him in the Colts quarterback mix. Again, I thought it was a Frank Reich connection with Jim that obviously helped things out. And, I don't think Chad misbehaved in a big way here in Indianapolis by any means. But as you know, to be the quarterback of a franchise, you got to be relatively squeaky clean. And I just don't know if Chad had that. So now it's all about Jacob Eason. He's he's the hot young name here in Indianapolis. Whereas I want to say they cut Chad in September or October, and I don't think he's been on a roster since.
Yeah, it's really been that preseason, man. You mentioned it here in the fantasy streets of the world. Us true D-gens are playing daily fantasy, even for those preseason games. And Chad, I mean, he's a stud, and he could run around. Self-pronounced second fastest QB in the NFL. God love him. Hopefully Chad figures it out somewhere else. Last thing before we move on to the gut feel round, I want to talk about these pass catchers because T.Y. Hilton. I want to hear your thoughts on if you think he'll be back. Also, Zach Pascal, someone that might not be there. Even Mo Alley Cox and Trey Burton are free agents. I feel like they really could make some moves both in the draft and in free agency here at receiver and tight end alike.
It's funny. Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, spoke last week about, and obviously everyone would love to have this, but he goes, 10-87 in Kansas City look pretty good. We could always upgrade at wideout and tight end. I expect Zach Pascal and Mo Alley Cox to be back, two restricted free agents that I think just consistent. Mo Alley probably a little bit more high-end ceiling that, he might be 27, 28, but let's remember he's super young in his football career, considering he played basketball at VCU. Hilton is such a fascinating one. He's plastered on the side of Lucas Oil Stadium. Jim Irsay absolutely loves him, but there's finances, and he's a free agent for the first time in his NFL life, and he's 31 years old. And I don't think physically he fell off a cliff this year, but production-wise, you can't ignore it. Now, at the same time, how much of that was Phillip Rivers? What is this something where you get more of a vertical threat from a passing game standpoint? Does that all of a sudden kind of cater to more of what Hilton is? Full well, Ian, 30-year-old wideouts just don't produce in the NFL. Larry Fitzgerald is a freak. Julio Jones is a freak. That's it. I mean, those are really the only guys over the last, handful of years that have really produced. Sure, you got a Edelman in the slot or, maybe an Antonio Brown 3 or 4 years ago, but you just don't see that. So I think you have to acknowledge that. And obviously, wideout is a very deep class in free agency. And you've got a wide variety of skill sets as well. So I think they will look to bring back Hilton, but at the same time, if you can get Kenny Golladay, Allen Robinson, I mean, that maybe will complement kind of more of your wideout skill set. And then Parris Campbell is still kind of the forgotten name of the staff is bullish on him. He's had some very difficult injuries in his first 2 seasons. If healthy, I think he can flourish in a Frank Reich system.
Yeah, that dude is electric. I mean, we're talking true, angle or racing speed sometimes with him. And that's good to hear that Mo Alley-Cox should be back. I don't know if I've ever seen a player look bigger on the field than Mo Alley-Cox. I mean, allegedly there might be some bigger guys throughout the league, but that dude just looks huge. Excited to see that ceiling. Yeah, excited to see that ceiling hopefully flourish more, as you mentioned. All right, we move on to the gut feel now round, and we are recording this on February 4th. So Kevin is not Nostradamus. There could be some things that change, maybe a big quarterback deal, but as things stand right now, we'll get his opinion on the following topics. I want to start off with that quarterback position because Rivers is gone. Maybe Jacoby's gone. Jacob Eason is now popping to the top of all these, betting odds saying who's going to be the week 1 starter. Basically, does Eason deserve to be the favorite, or do you just think there's no way they enter the season without, trying to spend up more at the position?
Yeah, I think there's no way Jacob Eason is your starter week 1 or honestly even throughout 2021. As much as I can listen to those people say that and probably honestly agree with some of it because I'm such a big believer in finding the long-term answer. Chris Ballard said before Phillip Rivers retired that he wasn't sure if he was comfortable with Jacob Eason being the backup. So again, you got to take that for what it's worth. And what just kills you with Eason is in the last 4 years of football, he could have played in 55 games. Like if you look at Washington, Georgia, and now the Colts, He could have played in 55 games. He only played in 16 of them. And that's just the reality of where you're at with them. And I don't see this franchise all of a sudden being like, all right, Jacob, let's go baptism by fire for 16 games. So you love the big arm. He was hurt big time by COVID. We talk about preseason dreams. I mean, I couldn't wait to watch Jacob Eason in the preseason. And then all of a sudden that happened. So that's the reality of where you're at right now. And while I'm team draft, I think we'll go with some sort of veteran stopgap.
Yeah. And again, we get it. I mean, we talked about the team needs, QB, wide receiver, edge rush, maybe cornerback. But truly, if they resign a couple of their guys and are able to address the positions meaningfully well, you can't see why they would be in that win now mode. So that'll be interesting. That's one of the, again, just in terms of who can go into a system and play well right away, you can see why, Watson, some of these other guys maybe and Stafford particularly had their eye on the Colts. I want to talk about this run game, particularly in fantasy land. We always want these running backs that can be, the bell cows and get those 300 plus touches. Jonathan Taylor came on so strong at the end of the year, looked like a different guy. With that said, I mean, we did see a 3-back committee for a lot of the year. I know Nyheim Hines is still going to be the pass down back. Do you expect Jonathan Taylor to be getting that 20-touch workload, starting September, or are we going to see things sink back a little bit into that Wilkins, Taylor, Hines committee before the games really start to matter?
Well, I think the first domino is what happens with Marlon Mack. He's tore his Achilles in the season opener, coming off a 1,000-yard season. I mean, for what it's worth, for a quarter and a half, he looked great in Jacksonville that season opener. And then obviously now he is a free agent and he's coming off a torn Achilles, and there's some intriguing running backs on the open market. So where is he at physically? And then where is he at, NFL wise? Like, where is he playing? The Colts have definitely not ruled that out, and they love Marlon Mack as a human and as a pro. Having said that, Jonathan Taylor deserves to be the bell cow. Come on. I mean, you watch the final 7 or 8 games of the season, guys not named Derrick Henry, find me a more consistent runner than Jonathan Taylor. I think he had, I want to say it was at least 70 yards in the final 7 games, and I actually think he was over 70 in the playoff game as well. So that's what we look for. And I'm sure in the fantasy world, it's so boom or bust with running backs. If you can have a consistent guy like that, boy, that is a dream. And so Taylor did that. It's so rare to see guys, have arguably, almost 2 months of, over 70 yards in every single game. So you drafted him in the second round for a reason. You traded up for him for a reason. It took a while. He had some growing pains, and Nyheim Hines is still going to have a very carved out role and should. But as a first, second down back, Jonathan Taylor getting 18 to 22 carries a game, needs to be the norm. And honestly, I think it will be, unless you do bring back Mac. But still, even then, I don't think it's like a guarantee that all of a sudden Taylor's going to be scaled back to 14 carries a game.
Yeah, I mean, particularly if he keeps playing like he did in the second half. I mean, he had the yards and every, behind the scenes metric thing was just saying this was a truly different back. He broke like 8 or 9 tackles on runs in the first kind of 2 months of the year and like literally tripled that over the back half of the season. This guy was impossible to bring down. That's great to hear that they should be featuring him regardless of how the Max situation turns out. How surprised were the Colts? Please continue. And then how surprised were the Colts about Taylor's disability to catch the ball? Because I know that was one of the issues coming out.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it wasn't just the production, it was how he was getting that production. It's not running behind a great offensive line and, gaping holes that you and I could go get 2 yards or something, with. It was, this is a guy that's making guys miss behind the line of scrimmage. And that was kind of a question because at Wisconsin, obviously, he's running behind such a great offensive line in college. Yeah, I would say his pass catching might have been the biggest surprise. I think going into the playoffs, he had 30 catches and 31 targets or something just crazy. Now, having said that, he had 2 drops that were pretty big in that Buffalo playoff game. So I think that is something just to keep in mind a little bit there. But, third down wise, Nyheim Hines, again, it's just a different element. Now, Phillip Rivers loves those type of backs on third down, and so he's no longer here. So that's something that you have to factor in. But I think Hines is too much of a weapon on that passing down to take off the field. But clearly, Frank Reich is not afraid to use Taylor. And I mean, this is not a guy that's just going to have 5 catches, for the entire season. I mean, he is going to be involved, I think right around a couple catches a game.
Yeah, I remember he had that long, that short swing pass against the Texans that he just ran like 40 yards untouched.
Fourth
I remember,
down play,
yeah, that was awesome. I remember because like Jacoby, okay, we all know Rivers is better, but like Jacoby made some great plays in 2019, like off script. But that play in particular reminded me, like, you know what? If you got a smart veteran quarterback back there, just knows where the loose spot is, man, you'll take that easy pass all day long. So good to see that Taylor, even if he's not Nyheim Hines, he can still take advantage of that when the defense allows him to do so. Sticking with the receivers, we talked about T.Y. Hilton a little bit already. Perhaps they can get him back on a team-friendly deal. But, hey, they at least already got Michael Pittman and Parris Campbell. Do you think they're comfortable with those 2 guys leading the way, or do you see them trying to bring in, kind of a big number 3 member to add the group?
Yeah, I think they will look heavily into that. Again, as much as they're bullish on Campbell, you can't ignore the injuries. Now, in terms of Pittman, I think he's got the potential to be a flat-out stud. I thought his yard after catch ability, I think people, look at USC and they think pretty boy wideout, what's he going to do after the catch, things like that. They forgot who his dad was. I mean, this is a guy that is pretty aggressive with the ball in his hands. I'd like to see a few more 50-50 opportunities for him, particularly in the red zone. And a lot of fantasy people were like, wait, 6'4", 220, and he's not that big of a target inside of the 10. So I think that's kind of the next step for him. Beating press coverage is probably something as well. But honestly, I could see Michael Pittman taking a big step in year 2 and really being a guy that, certainly maybe the number 1 here in Indianapolis and could push for, top 10, top 15 wideout ability. And I know that might surprise some people and that might be me going on a little bit of a ledge there, but I do think he has that type of ability, especially just the whole yard after catch. I mean, there were some screens, there were some crossers where they just got the ball in Pittman's hands, and he's a long strider and 4.5, I think he runs a little bit faster than that, honestly, with the ball in his hands. So I think those are all really intriguing traits that you got to like about Pittman.
He's a handful in the open field. No, I don't think hey, he's not going to be, have an average draft position inside the top 10, 15, but that's in his range of outcomes as what's looking like the undisputed, potentially number 1 in Indy. So, yeah, and that was the thing with Pittman, with Hilton, all these guys. I mean, you can criticize their lack of production at times, but it wasn't like they were getting force-fed 8, 10 targets and not doing anything with it. It was usually just a trouble to figure out who is Rivers going to be targeting the most this game. And again, Rivers was making the smart decision, doing all the right NFL things, but in Fantasyland, we just want those volume hogs if possible. All right, so last thing, I want to talk about this tight end position because, even in Philly and now in Indy, Frank Reich knows how to enable a productive tight end. It's just been really over the last 2 years, if they're all healthy, it's been a problem to figure out who's going to actually be getting that production. Burton's a free agent. You said they're going to try to bring back Mo Alley Cox, hopefully. Jack Doyle, I know they love him there, but it looks like maybe they could save some money if they cut him. Basically, how do you see his tight end situation shaping out? Because if it is just the Mo Alley Cox show, that could be someone that really puts up some numbers here.
Yeah, it's such a great debate. I know from a cap standpoint, yes, Jack Doyle, you would save some money. I think they just value him too much. He's just consistent. And Mo Alley Cox, there is still a bit of a boomer bust, I think, sort of look on it. Yes, they think there's more there, but I just think if you were to all of a sudden cut Doyle, you might be thinking to yourself, man, week 13, it'd be nice to have him pretty reliable and a guy that's been relatively durable as well in his career. Now, having said that, Jim Irsay, like I said earlier, he felt like tight end could be upgraded. And there are some, there's a Hunter Henry, there's a, Jonnu Smith, who knows about Tanyan, I think is a free agent as well, coming over from Green Bay. He actually played his college football in the state of Indiana. So the tight end of Frank Reich offense, that's always something that is pretty attractive. I know there's been a little bit of flirted around what happens if Zach Ertz becomes expendable in Philly, put on the trade market, certainly the Frank Reich connection there. So I think those are some names and just things to keep an eye on. I could see them bringing back Alley Cox. I could see them bringing back Burton. He's a guy that, he battled a few drops this season, but is a versatile role, stayed healthy, injured his calf in training camp, but then played the final 13 games. And that was a big thing for him coming off the injuries in Chicago. So I could see them running it back with the same tight end group, but I also feel like if the right opportunity presents itself, you've got to get a little bit more explosive there, and maybe just a little bit younger with Doyle and Burton, both over the age of 30.
Yeah, Burton made some great plays, particularly when he had a chance to do so. And again, I mentioned even Jacoby in 2019. I liked a few things he did. I will say all these fantasy football managers out there hate those two guys because whenever the Colts are on the 1 yard line, we had a couple wildcat snaps to Burton where he wouldn't give the ball to Taylor, or Jacoby would come in and take the QB sneak because Rivers isn't about that life anymore. So I will say if those guys end up leaving town, despite them being good players, would not be the worst thing for Jonathan Taylor managers out there. Kevin, thank you so much for the time. Give us a bold offseason prediction before we get out of here.
Oh man. Well, I guess I kind of hinted at it earlier. I think Michael Pittman could be a top 10 wideout this year in fantasy. I'm not going to lie. I don't know maybe where he falls in the 2021 early preseason rankings, but to me, that sounds kind of bold. So I'll say that Michael Pittman is a top 10 wideout in 2021.
I love it, man. If I had to guess, I think he'd be kind of in that lower 30 range, but he's going to be one of those guys that it's going to keep popping up on, you should be drafting this guy, because when we have someone that's being priced as a wide receiver 3 that has wide receiver 1 in his range of outcomes, those are the guys you should be going after. That's why Will Fuller was such a great steal last year. And even some of those Giants guys, while it didn't work out, were looking good as well. So we chase volume, not talent in fantasy football, and Michael Pittman might just have both. Kevin, thank you so much for the time. Again, people can find you on Twitter at KBowen1070. What do you got on the docket? Where can they listen to you?
Yeah, 107.5 The Fan is our radio station. I got a podcast called Kevin's Corner. Comes out every week, talking Colts. So busy off season, like we have talked about here. And so appreciate you having me on, Ian. Yeah,
man. Thanks for coming on. Yeah, make sure you follow Kevin again on Twitter at KBowen1070, one of, if not the single best Colts reporter in the business. He's Kevin. I'm Ian. Thank you as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.